Tech Talk with Matthew Dickerson. Matthew Dickerson. Tech Talk. Sit back and relax. It's time to talk technology.
Welcome back to Tech Talk with Matthew Dickerson, where the future gets its finest features and technology takes centre stage. For Season 5, Episode 2, we're taking a thrilling trip through time, revisiting the most fascinating, futuristic and fabulous finds from the second half of 2024. From AI breakthroughs in birdwatching to timber towers touching the skies, and from carbon composite battery triumphs to spacesuits recycling the unthinkable. These stories captured imaginations and pushed boundaries. Whether it's smarter houseplants, free Wi-Fi at 30,000 feet, or fraud-fighting AI grannies, we're diving deep into the innovations that shaped the year's second act. And speaking of innovation, here's an offer you can't miss. Review Tech Talk with Matthew Dickerson on your favourite podcast app, send a screenshot of your review to freebook@techtalk.digital, and we'll send you a free copy of my latest Tech Talk compilation book. It's our way of saying thanks for your support and for being part of the conversation. So sit back, stay curious, and let's celebrate the best of tech from July to December 2024.
For those who love a little greenery about the house, just how green is your thumb? Is it merely a touch of green here and there, or is it green enough to, say, turn your entire house or apartment into a small slice of the Daintree rainforest? For a while there at our place, we had trouble keeping even the plastic plants going. But if you are ready to step up the game on the indoor plants front, then a company called Willow may have a very neat piece of tech for you. Matt?
Surely there's a solution here with technology, because I haven't got a very green thumb. There's not many green plants around my place.
Yeah,
and I like the fact that you struggle with plastic plants as well, because you know you're really
I
struggling.
love the idea of indoor plants, but they're yet to work at our house.
Well, this might be the solution for you, because one of the problems, of course, is that we forget to water them.
Yeah.
But we also have other problems like watering them too much, which sounds like a crazy concept, but you can, of course, drown a plant. What you really need to know is, well, what is the moisture level of my soil? Is it getting enough light? Is it sitting near a window? Is
Yeah,
it
that's
somewhere
the other
there?
thing, the light availability.
Exactly right. What about the temperature? Have I got it at the wrong spot in the house? Maybe it's too warm, too cold in my house. Humidity, should I put it outside for a little while? All these questions I don't really know the answer to, and I don't really have enough time to research it. So I just
Exactly, but you might notice the plant struggling, but only when it's too late. It's
But
just
when it is-
breathing its last breath.
That's right. But when it is struggling, you don't know which one of all those different variables
Yeah,
is
that's right.
the variable
What
you've
have I
got to
done
change. That's right. So what Willow's got for us all, which is fantastic, is a lovely little sensor that you put into the soil. It's only fairly small. It looked like it was about, say, 2 or 3 centimetres in diameter across and maybe 8 centimetres tall.
Wow.
Some sensors at the bottom. Stick that in the soil, and of course it will measure all of these things for you: the moisture in the soil, the light intensity it's receiving, temperature, humidity. And it's not a real bit of tech if it doesn't have an app, of course. So it's got an app. It gives you an update on all this information, so you can look at that, or you can also get alerts to say, hey, I'm struggling here, I need a bit
So
of
your watch
moisture.
is going to buzz, not only for all the other notifications, but to
right.
tell you that the plants are a little bit stressed.
So while you're ignoring all those other ones, and you ignore this one too possibly, but no, don't ignore it. Have a look at it, and then you can see what it is. But it gets even better because you also use your app to take a photo of your plant, and then your app will say, I know what sort of plant that is. So based on that specific plant, I know what it should need in terms of its nutrient levels, its moisture levels,
How
etc.
cool's that?
That's even better. So it's not just a random, I think I'm getting enough light, but I'm not quite sure. It's this plant needs this much light in an average week or an average day, so please move me somewhere where I've got a bit more light or a bit less light maybe, who knows.
So there are literally no more excuses for killing indoor plants.
It does sound like it's getting harder and harder, doesn't it, to say, I didn't know about that one. The devices, not surprisingly, are dust, dirt, water resistant, so that's kind of makes sense because you're going to be in an environment. They're going to be outside and get a bit wet, or not outside, but not in an enclosed environment and get a bit wet from time to time. And you get a nice, easy scoring system. So you get a certain score to tell you how things are going. So if the score drops a bit low, then you can start to investigate which of the various things. So I think the idea here is pretty good. More importantly, if you do want to start to grow your forest in the house, you can have up to 40 of these devices communicating with your app at the same time. And they actually rely on a hub. So they have a Bluetooth hub, so they're communicating around the house via Bluetooth, so very low energy, much better for battery life. And then the hub, which is plugged into mains power, is what will actually communicate back with your app. So it gives you the best of both worlds. It gives you the communication back to your app, but also all the devices have got very long battery life. So I think that's not a bad option.
Very cool.
They're not too expensive. You can buy, obviously, you want to have lots of these plants around. So $200 will give you the actual hub, the initial hub, and 5 sensors, so it gets you going. There's different options below that and above that, but it's not a bad way to get started with a few plants around the home.
And sorry, did you say you can have up to 4 hubs?
Up to 40 plants.
40 plants.
Yeah, so you have one hub per 40 plants. So if you've got more than 40 plants, you need to buy a second hub for that.
Yeah, okay. Yeah,
so that's not too bad. 40 plants around the home. That's getting a bit serious, isn't it? That's about 39 more serious than I've ever been.
You can junglify quite well with that.
That's right, yeah. So it's a good idea, and it just comes back to that whole thing that we talk about so often. We're getting technology to give us information. How we deal with that information, what we do with that, is all part of the challenge for us as humans, but getting the information in the right format is really important.
But this thing won't save you when you're on holidays because you're too far away to be able to water the plants. Unless you can rig up an indoor sprinkler system that's computerised.
That's right, without doing the rest of the house at the same time. But maybe you could check some of these specs before you go on holidays. So you know
that'd be a good idea.
It looks like it's got enough moisture and a little bit extra on that. Probably not perfect, but you can always ring a friend and say, a really important job for you today, James, when you're around my place.
Just received an alert about my maidenhair fern.
Quick, go in. Here's where the key is. Actually, here's my electronic code to get into the place. Go for it.
Now, are you an avid puzzler? Does nutting out the brain teasers in the daily paper bring a sense of satisfaction like no other? Or is it just like the patterns in things to seek order amongst the chaos? Well, there's a puzzle challenge afoot with $1 million at stake, folks. And to look at it, you'd think that's pretty easy money. But here's the catch, folks. There's always a catch. To claim the prize in this one, you have to be AI. Matt, you have to be AI.
You have to be AI. So this afternoon, after we finish here, maybe we could do a little bit of pico parking, or we could do a little bit of AI problem solving. And this is the thing that AI isn't good at, hence the $1 million prize fund, to try and get someone who can create AI that's a bit better.
So what does a puzzle look like then?
Well, the puzzle's very simple. I looked at some of the puzzles themselves, and the tests that you see that are the abstract thinking puzzles that are a range of colours, and you've got to rearrange that to look like this picture over here. What do you need to do? Do you need to invert it? Do you need to flip it? You need to rotate it? That type of thing. So it looked like some puzzles that typically they said teenagers would get 85% of these puzzles. So they don't sound incredibly difficult in terms of the puzzle themselves. Even primary school kids, they said most primary school kids, so the majority of primary school kids will be able to solve most of these puzzles. So you go, AI, do it on its head.
Yeah.
But here's the thing. AI is very good, and computers in general are very good at remembering stuff.
Yeah.
We aren't. Our memory fades. Our memory is a bit different. You and I will see the same event on a footy field and we'll go, what about that? No, I didn't see that. I saw this happen, depending on what team we're following probably.
Yeah.
But we aren't great with exact memory, and we aren't great with long-term memory. It slowly fades away till it
long-term memory is really just remembering the memory.
Yeah.
And then remembering the memory of the memory.
That's right.
And it's a Chinese whisper happening in your own head.
Perfect. Yes, that's a great description. I often say it's like a photocopy that does over and over, but I like the Chinese whisper better. I'll steal that, thanks. And so that's the thing with AI. It can remember things really well, and it knows they're going to be accurate, they're going to be the same. But if you say, now use that information to solve a problem, to be creative, to have something different thrown at it, all AI can do is look at a huge data set of previous problems or previous information and say, based on all this, here's the answer. But if it's something new, that's where AI goes, I don't know about that because I haven't seen it before. Yeah. That's where humans are very clever. We go, well, based on this, and that,
I can apply my learning from the past and change that around. And okay.
And then I come up with a creative, innovative solution.
Yeah.
So this is the challenge. They basically put out a challenge, and there's some specific rules around it. It's got to be able to solve the problems within 12 hours. Doesn't sound like that's that difficult. Like 12 hours is a long time. kids that solve these problems solve them in 10 or 15 minutes. So 12 hours, fair amount of time. You can't have a supercomputer to do it. So you can't use brute force just to go and try a random bunch of solutions till finally it gets one right. It's actually got to solve the problem. And you've got to have, it's all got to be offline. So in other words, you can't be relying on what else is happening out there on the internet. So you've got to basically take it offline. First prize in this is $500,000 and you've got to score 85%. And that's 1% higher than the average human score. So when humans are given these tests, 84% they get.
So it's for people who are designing AI engines, right?
Correct.
Yeah, okay, yeah, okay.
So, and I did say that to my son home who has a computer science degree. I said, so do you want to play with AI this weekend and do this problem solving? And he said, oh, I think I'd just rather play Pico Park. So, so it is designed for people that are designing.
You really want to have to think too much.
That's right. So the whole concept is put together by someone from a company called Zapier and someone from Google. And basically they've got this thing called an ARC test, an abstract and reasoning corpus, so ARC test. And go through and do that, solve that, and you can stick $500,000. I don't know what the other $500,000 is for. Maybe the second and third for people that get it almost right or take a bit longer.
Slower,
that's right. Yours is a bit slower, but total $1 million prize pool there.
Yeah, right.
And often when you see companies do this, they're probably putting it out there for a bit of publicity and they're not expecting to hand out the money. So the challenge is out there. If you're into AI, go and take the money off them.
Maybe this is like some of those movies from the 80s and stuff where someone solves this problem and they go, right, this is the person we need to solve this bigger problem.
That's right. Or now we've got that problem solved, we own the copyright for that solution, so away we go. On. But it sounds quite fascinating. But there is hope there for us, James. When the AI overlords take over, then they might need some humans that can think differently. And so if we put ourselves in that category, then we're okay, I think, at this stage.
Or at least if the AI overlords take over, maybe I just have a really simple picture puzzle on the front door, which is the key to get through the door to my doomsday bunker.
Break through this and you can come in and, you couldn't get it. Fantastic.
If you're all excited about the idea of colonising Mars like I am, and you fancy a bit of space travel, this first story may give you just a little pause for thought. Well, when you're travelling long distances in space, possibly travelling off to far planets like Mars, where there is nary a drop of water, you've pretty much got to take it all with you. And be very careful not to spill a drop. You're on stage 7 water restrictions. But when absolutely every single drop counts, all the water, that is all the water, needs to be recycled. Matt, the thought of drinking recycled urine may be enough to have some people reconsider their life choices. But the latest design in spacesuits can do some pretty nifty tricks.
It can, and of course, so often we find that people see something in fiction, in the movies, in cartoons, and they go, hold on, we could do that. And I think this has been a little bit inspired maybe by the movie Dune, the 2021 movie Dune, where they had their still suits, and their still suits captured all of their moisture, their perspiration, their urine, all the rest of it, and reuse that because of the water scarcity. This isn't quite the same. These are still spacesuits, and in the past, spacesuits have used what's known as a maximum absorbency garment, a MAG. Now, that's a really nice way of saying a nappy. Because if you said to an astronaut, by the way, when you go for that spacewalk, you're going to be wearing a nappy, it mightn't sound quite as exciting or really something you want to jump onto. So a mag, you've got to put your mag on. That's a cool thing, whatever that is. This here is basically a concept where they're saying, exactly as you said, we need to preserve all the water we've got for convenience when you're in space, but also for necessity as you go in space. So Cornell University has been working on this. And they've got a forward-reverse osmosis unit. A forward-reverse just sounds like back to where you started, doesn't it? Go forward, go back, and that's where you come from.
There's got to be meaning in there somewhere, I'm going to guess.
Something like that.
Yeah.
They've got a vacuum-based external catheter, and basically they collect your urine, and they can take that through for you to drink that. 87% they can get from whatever you produce to be able to be drunk. They can do that in under 5 minutes.
Wow.
So if you're thirsty and you need to go to the toilet, well, go to the toilet, and 5 minutes later, at 87% efficiency, you can be drinking your urine, which is now no longer urine.
So it's water.
It's water, that's right.
And we've got to also consider that a large amount of water that is drunk today from your tap, from those bottled water, its origin has been through an animal's body.
Somewhere.
Probably a human's body.
Probably more than one.
Yeah. And so a lot of people go, oh, no, I can't drink that. And in times of drought, I know that Toowoomba and I think Goulburn had some major issues, and it was put to their the townsfolk, would you be prepared to drink recycled water as an option when their dams were drying up? And I think the vote was complete no. It was
Which is interesting because we do it, you say, through history, through all the different animals that water's been through. We're not creating new water, it's the same water.
Yeah.
But we're probably doing it a bit more.
Water cycle.
That's right. We're probably doing it a little bit more localised than that because we've got rivers.
That's
right. And many towns and cities along rivers take water from the river to put it through a water treatment plant. But upstream of that, there's probably been a sewage treatment plant. So it's not just urine going into the river there. Yeah. It's been treated, sure, but not to a drinking standard.
But people don't like the idea of such a short step.
That's right, yeah. If it's 50 kilometres up the river, it goes in it's diluted and that's okay.
With stuff.
Yeah, that's right. Mixed with other cow poo in the river system. Yeah. So this is quite fascinating.
It's a hard one to sell, though, because it's such a short and direct sort of a step. But anyway.
Well, 50 kilometres up the road compared to straight out of your body into your body.
Yeah.
But the system they've created can deliver half a litre of potable water in that 5 minutes. So that's a fairly big wee. I don't know that I wee that much when I go. I haven't measured it, but I don't know that it's that much in one wee. But half a litre, I could urinate half a litre, and then 5 minutes later, I could be drinking half a litre. Over half a litre, that's a problem. But up to half a litre, they can process that. Now, astronauts are probably a little bit more used to this. I'm not sure if they're more comfortable with it, but they're more used to it because the International Space Station has been doing recovery of all the water in there, including urine, for years. They've got about a 98% water recovery rate, but they've got a fairly large device on the ISS that does this. It feels a bit different somehow that it's all in one your suit. That's right. So it does.
If you're drinking that water and it's warm.
Well, that's even worse, isn't it? I hadn't thought of that. Yes, that's terrible.
Now, 5 minutes is enough for it to go cold, surely.
Surely. They maybe got some cooling in there somewhere. But I also think you could use this same technology for areas that we have that have got a scarcity of water on Earth.
Absolutely.
But also in a disaster, when you have something like a tsunami come through or something that knocks out water supply for whatever reasons, for example, a global IT outage might be one example, one reason.
In times of drought when your dams dry up.
That's right. So go to the toilet over here. Maybe every household will have one. Go to the toilet over here, just for number ones, not number twos, and we'll just put that through into the fridge and you'll be right with that 5 minutes later. So technology is wonderful.
Get ready for it, folks. It's coming.
That's right. Technology is wonderful, but whether or not we're comfortable with it, I don't know.
Now, are you one to tense up at the sound of the high-pitched scream of a dentist drill? Granted, nobody loves a stint in the dentist chair. It's a must-do more than anything else. And the diligent among us dutifully surrender every 6 to 12 months for the sake of our long-term dental health. Well, if you're one of the brave, for whom a trip to the dentist is a walk in the park, and the sound of the drill is neither here nor there for you, well, how would you feel if your next crown was planted by a robot? Matt, open wide, here comes the robot dentist.
For some people that feel a bit uneasy, do you think this would make them feel more comfortable?
No.
Just imagine, you're sitting in the chair, your mouth's wide open, and in comes a robotic arm with a spinning piece of metal on the end. And just to get you fired up, as it's a metre or two away, it just...
Now, we're going to assume that any other humans in the room are going to have some empathy and going to take some care, but a robot... That's cold.
It is, isn't it? Now, if you think about it logically, it's going to be better.
Don't move.
Well, that's the first part. It's got to be better because a robot can do things more accurately. Now, in the tests they've been doing, a crown, putting a crown on a tooth, for example, normally, apparently, that's a 2-hour, 2-session process to put a crown on a tooth. In this process with a robot dentist, 15 minutes.
Oh, wow.
More accurate and faster. So that sounds fantastic. So... bring it on, you say. But
drive-through service.
That's right. But when you're sitting there in the chair with this thing coming at you, that might get a bit scary. Now, at this stage, they're still leaving a physical human robot in the room. So that makes you feel a bit more comfortable.
Sorry, a physical human robot?
A physical human dentist, sorry. A physical human dentist in the room, sitting in the corner, presumably reading the newspaper while the robot dentist does its job. But you'd feel a bit more comfortable if
that's right.
There's a human there just
the robot
watching.
goes haywire and starts drilling into all sorts of different parts of your body.
That's right. You start having things come out the side of your cheek or nose rings put in or something. So hopefully that's good. But the funny part is we do have robot surgeons now. I had a friend of mine who had a prostate operation, and he said it was all done via a robot. And I started thinking, why are we okay and comfortable with that compared to the robot dentist just feels a bit uncomfortable? But I think the difference there is you're knocked out. When you're having a prostate operation done, you completely pass it. You don't know about it. You just get told about it afterwards and you go, okay. Whereas in the dentist chair, you're watching what's happening up close.
Yes.
Now, I do think of one big advantage. Presumably the robot dentist is not going to chat to you and expect you to answer with fingers in your mouth going, like a normal dentist does. So that's one advantage. Surely the accuracy makes it better. They also are using 3D data they capture of your mouth. So apparently they're using better. Normally, say, you have an X-ray that a dentist might look at to see what might be happening in your mouth, but this is a 3D capturing of your mouth. So that's more accurate. So that means they can get to where they need to go better. They can get better cavity, look where cavities might be and address those better. So lots of advantages from a technical point of view. But even though I know all of that, if I'm sitting in the chair watching this dentist come at me that's a robot, anyway, at this stage,
So
you'll be
it
happy.
takes a lot of psychology to just get your mind through that.
It does. Now, you'll be happy to know it's still awaiting FDA approval in the US at the moment. So they can't do it. They've been doing testing. They've been using prototypes, but nothing approved yet. So you can't go in. You're not going to see this happen tomorrow. And presumably by the time the FDA gives approval for it, it's been through enough tests that you can be pretty comfortable it's okay.
So what we're doing is we're just introducing you to the idea. So when it finally does hit, you'll be a little bit more comfortable with it.
You'll go,
You'll see this. It's been coming for a while.
I heard about that years ago. It's all okay.
I think we'll be fine by now. Yeah.
Why are you still standing here, human dentist? Where's my robot dentist to come?
Oh, look, everybody. It's surprise, surprise time. Now, a recent study on mobile phone usage has found that there is no link to brain cancer. Sorry, I'll read that again. There is still no link between mobile phone usage and brain cancer. But wait, Matt, can we be sure about that for the 2000th time?
No, we can't. And
Okay. This is time for another study.
That's right. This is part of the problem. It's that beautiful classic science quote that says the absence of evidence is not the evidence of absence. So I can do 5,000 studies or 10,000 studies or 100,000 studies and show there's no link between a mobile phone and brain cancer. But until we see definite evidence that it did happen, we can't say definitely that it won't ever happen.
That's right.
So all we
that's
can rely
why
on,
scientists don't tend to speak in absolutes.
correct. And in this case, because the only way you would prove there was a link is to find a link.
That's right.
It's hard to say there is no link. But all the evidence so far says there has been no link found. And we've had phones around for a while. 3rd of April 1973, Dr. Martin Cooper made the first phone call from a mobile phone, rang one of his competitors, I think Joel Engels, the competitor's name, and said, hey, guess where I'm calling you from? Look out your window, or words to that effect. I'm not sure exactly what he said, but that's what I would have said. So, and again, they weren't commonplace in 1973, but they've been around for a long time. That's over 50 years since that first mobile phone call. But we've had a lot of phones in usage for a long period of time, surely more than enough time to work out if there have been some links. So there's a group called ARPANSA, ARPANSA, and that's backed by the World Health Organization. So they've looked at about 5,000 studies conducted from 1994 to 2022. And so at the moment, out of all those studies, they couldn't find any that had any link from brain cancer or any other cancers around our head, throat cancer, any other cancers that might be caused by it. And there's still a bigger risk when we go out in the sun and get burnt from the sun, because we know there are cancers created from that. With phones, though, we're still pretty confident they're safe to use.
And not many people are holding the phone to their ear these days. With excellent microphone and speaker technology, you can hold the phone in front of you and still have a good conversation.
Or have your headsets.
Have the headsets, yeah, all those sorts of things.
And that's using Bluetooth, which is very low power.
Yeah.
It only goes a couple of metres, so it's not trying to get kilometres away to where a tower might be. So we do talk about a lot. Non-ionising radiation, of course, is what electromagnetic waves in this spectrum, in these frequency ranges. And the thing I think that's probably ramped this up again is 5G, because everyone knows that 5G is higher frequency than 4G, so 4G might have been safe, but we know that 5G is going to cause all sorts of problems.
Can we just jump straight to 8G and maybe that'll be
the one?
Yeah, maybe
right.
10G. Or
so even with 5G, even with testing around those higher levels or higher frequencies, the radiation is not the type of radiation that's actually going to do any damage. So there are some things, though, where some different things have happened that have got some people a bit stirred up. You may remember that in France, the National Frequency Agency asked Apple to pull sales of the iPhone 12 due to higher radiation levels from that, and then adjust the output from those phones.
That was a couple of years. How many years ago?
It would have been a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
So there's one where people said, see, they finally found it. Now, that was a very specific circumstance. There was also an Italian court that sided with a plaintiff claiming that mobile phones caused brain tumours. That, again, was a court case, not necessarily an exhaustive scientific study, but there's been some doubts put forward about that particular one in terms of where was the evidence to show that. So at this stage, yes, mobile phones emit radio waves. Yes, you might be listening to this on a radio station or on a phone that's picked up signals, electromagnetic signals, or you might watch TV tonight. They're all electromagnetic radiation, but all seemingly fairly safe. And actually, that's a good point that I think, as I say it, because I just came up with it. But 1973, first mobile phone call, but we've had radio communication for a lot longer than since 1973.
Bingo.
And even though they're different frequencies and they're transmitting a lot further away than just a few kilometres, people are thinking, well, maybe a mobile phone is different because it's held at your ear. But we've got all these electromagnetic waves bouncing around.
That's right. Yeah, the microwave and radio wave noise around our heads right now is enormous.
People have been using CB radios in trucks for a long time. Farms are out there on their tractors.
TV signals floating through the air. Yeah, they've all got frequencies of these non-ionising radiation bands. And so, and if you are worried, phones are very little difference.
That's right. If you're worried about radiation, just don't go in the sun. That's the most damaging thing we've got in our environment, much more damaging than phones. So at the moment, yes, keep using your phone. Yes, it's all safe as far as we know at this moment in time.
Now, we've already talked about accessing the internet from the air. That's in commercial airlines, and how it's fairly impractical. Well, that was all before United Airlines teamed up with Starlink. And now, apparently, the sky's the limit very soon, Matt.
Oh, dear. Excuse the puns here. I still find it fascinating, although it's not been a great experience when I've used it. When you're in the sky, you're flying between countries, say, you're doing maybe 900, 950 kilometres an hour. You're not going above the speed of sound in commercial jetliners, but you're going up, getting close there. You're 10 to maybe 12 kilometres above the Earth, and you can sit there and you can use the internet. Now, not great. You're not streaming things. You're not getting great access, but you can still access internet. Now, the way they've done that in the past is by geostationary satellites, which are sitting 35,786 kilometres above the Earth. So you just imagine you've got one stationary satellite above the Earth and your plane's flying through this, as I said, say 950 kilometres an hour, and it's able to connect to that and give some internet. So even the fact when I've been on a plane, I've gone, it's not great, but wow, what we're doing here is pretty cool. So that's one area. Now, let's go to Starlink. Starlink sits at low Earth orbit, not geostationary. So you're talking about 550 kilometres above the Earth now.
Not too high at all.
And they're going around, relative to the Earth, at about 27,000 kilometres an hour. So here's this satellite going past 27,000 kilometres an hour. At a spot on the Earth, you might see that in the sky for about 10 minutes, say, at max.
Yeah.
So on a plane now, travelling at 950 kilometres an hour, with this thing above you at 27,000 kilometres an hour, you're connecting to that and getting dramatically better internet service than connecting to a satellite at 36,000 kilometres above the Earth. So it's pretty impressive. You pull all that together.
Extremely impressive, yeah.
And I didn't mind it so much back in the old days when I got on a plane and I'd send an email or set up my out-of-office auto reply and say, sorry, out of contact for 13 hours, I'm going Sydney to LA, that's it, you won't be able to talk to me for 13 hours. Now I can still be in contact with people, and you probably still could make phone calls, but don't. Please don't. Please, on the plane, just can you not make the phone call? Just send text messages, send emails, whatever. But the phone call, especially when it's the lovey-dovey saying goodbye to your son that night and hope to see you in the morning, and just spare me, please, while I'm sitting in the plane. But I think it's pretty impressive that you can do all of this, and now with Starlink, they're talking about streaming, so you don't need to download those movies before you get on the plane. You can stream while you're going through. The speed's going to be much better, but it blows my mind. You're on a plane going through the sky at a certain height, and still you're connecting to these low Earth orbit satellites.
Yeah, it's just an amazing thing. Now, I think, with Starlink, you've got a chain of these satellites that are zipping around the Earth. What they do, a lap every hour and a half, I think it is.
Yeah.
So they're moving fast, but I wonder if the signal is more difficult to maintain if you're going with
I was wondering that,
or against it.
That's right. I was wondering the same thing, because going against it, you're seeing that satellite for less period of time. That's right. Going with it, you kind of got a fraction longer.
Chasing it.
But you are chasing or going against them. But you're right, you've got these stream of these satellites, so you're constantly handing off, like you are with your mobile phone when you drive through the streets of Sydney and you're handing off from tower to tower. You're handing off from satellite to satellite. When you're driving your car, though, you're doing 30 or 40 kilometres an hour.
Relative speeds.
That's right.
Are much less, yeah.
And the cell towers are stationary. These satellites are not stationary, and your plane is not stationary. So overall, I do find it absolutely amazing. So from next year, United Airlines are saying they'll have 1,000 planes fitted out with this.
Oh.
I want to go to America just to be able to get on one of these planes and actually just test it out and see how they go. I'm sure that it won't be long before other airlines get on it as well. This is a partnership between United and Starlink at this stage, but I'm sure everyone will go, well, they've got that. We've got to be able to match that service. And what an easy way for people to be able to get it across oceans, for example, be able to get it in different areas rather than just, sometimes it used to be just on one massive land where you could get that sort of service on a plane, but this will be basically anywhere. Maybe the top end and the bottom of the country, the planet, North and South Pole might be a bit tricky because the satellites are typically going equator-ish in between the two tropics, but you might struggle down there, but I can live with that if that's the worst thing that happened.
But there'll be no excuses for being offline.
Well, there goes one of my, I get a rest now for 5 minutes. It's like,
just get to not think about contacting people or have been contacted.
Yeah, that's right. So, and it's funny because back in the old days, I used to still do a few emails, and people knew when I landed because they suddenly get bombarded with all these emails synchronising when I landed, but they wouldn't have that anymore. So, but it is quite fascinating.
Here's your chance to grab a free copy of the latest Tech Talk compilation book in 3 easy steps. Step 1. Listen to any Tech Talk episode, like this one right now. Step 2. Leave a review on your favourite podcast app. Step 3. Email a screenshot of your review to freebook@techtalk.digital with your name and address. The first 20 emails each week until the end of January 2025 will each receive a free book. Don't wait. You are listening to this podcast right now. Leave a review and send that screenshot to freebook@techtalk.digital. Tech Talk, your weekly gateway to the tech world.
Now, every couple of months, there becomes less and less reason behind range anxiety for the EV hesitant. As technology develops in this space, batteries improve more and more and more. The latest out of Chalmers University in Sweden sees them leaning heavily into carbon fibre composites. Matt, lighter batteries are on the way, and that means less power is required to move them, which means that EV ranges are set to stretch.
They're going a completely different way with this as well. It's not just about lighter batteries. I've got a bit of a problem here about whether or not the car is the battery or the battery is the car. Because in this particular scenario, they believe at Chalmers University they can create this carbon composite to build the car from that also doubles as
a battery.
Now, we've done a story some time ago now where concrete in a building could be used as a battery.
Yeah.
And so that's fine. That means you've got some sort of storage capacity in the building itself. So you can imagine a large skyscraper would have a lot of battery. In the way of a car, what you're really trying to do is reduce the weight of a car. Now, in a normal EV, and there's lots of variables, lots of different models, so I'm just going to use very round numbers here, about 500 kilograms of the car typically is battery. So that's a fair bit. Half a tonne is battery. The modern EV sedan, not a SUV style, but a sedan, might be 1,850 kilograms. So you can imagine 500 kilograms of that, that's a fair amount.
Yeah.
If you start to then take that apart and replace parts of that car with a carbon composite that also gives you a battery, it starts to get pretty exciting. So I did some numbers. I crunched a few numbers on how this might work. For example, if you look at the body shell of an EV, so typically in a Tesla, for example, it's aluminium. In most cars, it's just a mild steel, a pressed mild steel. You remove that body shell, it takes 300 kilograms off the weight of the car. Now, not that pleasant to drive because you're being buffeted by the wind, but replace that with a carbon composite. For a start, that carbon composite is lighter than aluminium or steel. So it might be 120 kilograms you save of that 300 kilograms in weight, but you also add a bit of battery. Now, you do the same with the chassis and the frame. Now, I have a question mark here about how good it would be to build the chassis and the frame out of a carbon composite, but surely carbon fibre. But leave that to the side for one moment. But the chassis itself is normally, the chassis and frame normally about 400 kilograms. So again, replace that, you save another 160 kilograms and add about 240 kilograms of battery storage. So if you just replace those two components, you've saved 280 kilograms off the weight of the car. You've added 420 kilograms worth of battery capacity. So that might mean you don't need the 500 kilo battery. Suddenly, your 1850 kilogram EV is down to 1100 kilograms. Now, I've got a large flaw in my plan. The typical energy density of a battery in an EV at the moment is about 250 watt hours per kilogram.
Right.
At the moment, Chalmers University have managed to get 30 watt hours per kilogram.
They're a bit short there.
Just a touch short.
But I
of
mean, they don't have to
250.
get up to 250 to give the same responsiveness, but it's just, it's still well below the mark, isn't it?
That's right. Now, again, we are very early days at this stage.
Yeah.
So we've talked about it a lot. Petrol engines have been developed for over 100 years. Batteries and various composites of batteries have been researched for a much shorter time frame, but it's serious now, so they're getting into it a bit more. So you're right.
And no one's been talking about carbon composites as well. And I'm just thinking, when you're building millions and millions of cars and you're building them out of carbon, isn't that taking carbon out of the carbon cycle?
I don't know.
There we go.
That's even deeper
It's
now.
achieving two ends to a means.
So the exciting part about this is that I think we'll be able to end up with lighter batteries, lighter cars. Now, Chalmers University claimed you'd extend the range by 70% by basically making the car out of a carbon composite that was the battery. My numbers didn't get 70%. That's a large difference.
Right.
Because remember, once the car is up and running, once it's accelerated to a certain speed, the weight of the car is not a major factor in how much energy you're using. It's more the rolling resistance and the air resistance. And we've talked about it before, double speed, quadruple air resistance.
Yeah.
So driving on the highway at 110, I imagine the weight of the car is minimal in the whole scheme of things in terms of battery usage. It's the air resistance and to a lesser extent the rolling resistance. Now, if you've got a lot of hills in the road, maybe because they're living in a hilly environment, maybe where they've got their 70% from, that's a bit different because you're having to drag all that weight up a hill, but you get a bit back when you go down the hill on the other side. So I don't get 70%, but I did certainly get figures up around 20% extra range with everything else being equal, same kilowatt hours of the car, etc., and just reduce that weight. Then I could see the numbers matching for 20%, which is still pretty impressive.
Well, if you're my EV has got a range a theoretical range of 420, that goes up to 500. I think that's significant.
It is significant. So 20%. I'd like to see the numbers where Chalmers came up with their 70% from. Again, I couldn't get the numbers to match their 70%, but it's pretty exciting. But it gets better because think about mobile phones. If you actually open a mobile phone, and I wouldn't say go and do that with a working phone, but if you've got an older one, you see that most of the volume of that phone is taken up with battery. And you don't need a lot of battery in a mobile phone to keep it working for a day, for example. So imagine replacing that big battery. The rest of the components in there are pretty small. So if you made the shell of that out of a carbon fibre composite that was the battery, suddenly you might get to the stage where you're getting a phone that might be millimetres thick, credit card size thickness. Just think about the screen and the electronics, and that might be all you need because the rest of it's taken up with a battery shell. Computers, notebook computers, for example, the same sort of thing. A large part, if you open up a computer, a large part underneath the trackpad and sometimes a bit of the keyboard is the battery. And a computer uses a fair bit of power. So the real secret here is to increase that 30 watt hours per kilogram. If you could get that up to 100, maybe 150, it's getting up closer to the
Yeah.
sort of capacity you get in a normal battery that you might have in a mobile phone or a notebook or an EV, and that gets pretty exciting. So,
Yeah, an absolutely exciting development there, and certainly watch this space, folks.
Yeah, so I still come back to that is you get to that question, does your car have a battery or is the battery a car? Or is the car a battery? Is the battery a car? I'm not sure what I'm saying here, but something like that. You know, the car could be the battery.
Excellent. All right, let's start the show today with a story for the renovators among us. People like having a window in their front door, and that's fair enough. Entryways and hallways can be dark and dingy, and the extra natural light can really lift a living space. And sometimes you just want to see who's at the front door. But sometimes you don't want the people outside to know whether or not you're home. Sometimes that little bit of mystery means a whole lot of extra security. So imagine if you could choose between sometimes clear glass and sometimes frosted glass on your front door. Well, then you'd have the freedom to check out the front garden, but also to strut around in the nude in your own home without the worry of being surprised by people who just want to chat about the afterlife. Matt, I am into this, and it's not just for the nudity.
Or the knocking on the door and talking about the afterlife. I want to first of all start off with a story to tell people what a terrible parent I am.
Oh,
because
confession time.
Confession time. In the Blue Mountains, there is a wonderful cable car called the Scenic Skyway.
It's awesome.
Awesome. I think it might be the largest or longest cable car ride in the Southern Hemisphere.
Yeah,
which
shout out to
basically
the guys
means-
who run it. It's a fantastic tourist enterprise.
Yeah, that's right. And biggest or best in the Southern Hemisphere basically means Australia. Probably to New Zealand there. But it's 720 metres long. And as you go across this cable car, you go across the Jemison Valley, which is about a 270 metre drop from the cable car to the bottom of the valley. So a long way. We took our family and we heard about this wonderful new cable car that had opened up. Well, sorry, the cable car had been there for a long time, but a new electro glass floor that could change from transparent to opaque.
All right.
And I went, that sounds pretty cool. So one day we're going through with the family and I said we should stop in the Blue Mountains and we'll look at this cool new cable car function or facility. We got in and the kids didn't know about this particular floor. So when you get in, the floor is opaque. It just looks like a normal white floor. And so I said to one of my kids, in fact, my youngest child, please lay down on the floor, just face down on the floor as we go. And why? Oh, just trust me, I'm your father.
I want to have a look out the window.
Yeah, so she did as she was instructed by her father and laid down flat on the floor. And as you move out across the Jemison Valley, they flick a switch and it goes from opaque to transparent.
Wow.
So you can imagine staring down at the floor, thinking you're staring down at whiteness, and then you're staring down at a 270 metre drop.
Yeah.
Well, my daughter burst into tears,
Oh, yeah, you're a good parent.
jumped into my lap, absolutely
on so many levels.
terrified. And I've gone, maybe that wasn't such a good idea for my darling daughter. But I was impressed with how they changed it from being opaque to transparent.
Technology.
That was pretty cool. Now, that was in a cable car. Obviously, I hope a lot of money was spent on that because it was the floor of the cable car. So obviously, you hope they spent a lot of money on getting that right. But you don't expect to spend that kind of money around the house. But now, and at the moment, only out of Home Depot in the US, there's a smart glass door, which exactly as you said, can change with a very easy process from opaque to transparent. Now, you can do it with an app on your phone. You can do it with your smart home device. Basically, a quick instruction, and that will change almost instantly.
So if you do have to bolt down the hall in the nude, you don't have to reach for a switch. You've just got your phone with you.
You got your phone with you, or you can talk to your smart home device.
Yep.
If it's whatever it is, a Google Home device or an Amazon, Alexa, whatever, you just say, Alexa, whatever your command is, change the front door.
No worries about frightening the neighbours.
Absolutely right. And no worry about neighbours looking in and seeing what you're up to at night time. You might want to see the sun during the day and then have it not come in or not your light from inside going out.
So many reasons.
And what I really like about it is it uses very minimal amount of power because it only uses power when it changes state from transparent to opaque. Not really changing state, I suppose, but changing its function from transparent to opaque. So it can run on battery.
So if you're showing off to your guests, then that's when it's going to really
That's it,
suck
when
the
you're
power.
flicking back and forth. But it's not using any power to maintain whether it be transparent or opaque. So I thought that was pretty cool because I initially imagined when I was starting to look at this story, I initially imagined it would take power to keep it in one state or the other, but it only needs power to change state. But after that, it's nothing. So it can run on batteries. It can plug in with USB-C. Even if you run on a couple of batteries, it'll last for a couple of months for normal usage, changing on a semi-regular basis. You can schedule it to go each night time. So during the day, great, I can look out and see the wonderful outside world. At night time, when you might be having a shower or maybe walking around the nude, then you can change it automatically. So I thought that was pretty cool, but I can see not just the front door. And the prices weren't too bad. You're paying around $1,200 to say $1,500, depending on how big a piece of glass is in the front door. But why not in the rest of your house? Front door today, think about the amount of curtains or some type of shade that you have.
That was the question I had. Could you just put them on the windows all around the house?
Why not? And it would just come down to the cost and the size of those windows. So if you've got various windows, now you might just have your front-facing windows. You don't mind the back windows being open all the time, but the ones that might face out on the street or the footpath, just have it set up on those.
Yeah,
so,
I was initially thinking some people got a great view out the front of the house, and sometimes you want to sit there and look out at the view, and sometimes you want a bit more privacy.
Yeah, so having that on a whole range of windows. Now, at the moment, they're not selling the glass where it's just cut to any size. They're saying, here's door 1 or door 2 or door 3.
But it's only a matter of time.
Only a matter of time, because if the technology has gone from a cable car in the Blue Mountains to a front door of your house, then surely the next easy step is any glass. And I love the idea of this because I just find them a bit cumbersome when you've got curtains, whether it be automated curtains or blinds or manual curtains or blinds. I just find all that a bit clumsy.
Yeah.
Whereas having something we can just change from one to the other, I think that's pretty cool.
Well, anytime we've had curtains with view or otherwise, they've always just stayed open. Yeah,
that's right. It's too much hassle. Unless you go for automated ones, it's just too much of a hassle to go and be bothered to change them. So, yeah, I actually love the idea, and I can hardly wait till we see it on any piece of glass. You just go and get a piece of glass, cut to size, and then have it hooked up, and away you go.
Dig in with our first story, all about sustainability. Now, a common theme on this program, going by our stories in the past, is, well, everything old is new again. And today, in our first story, we are looking at a turnaround in the building industry, moving away from steel and back into timber. Now, we're not talking just small-scale single-story buildings here. No, the sky's the limit, and we're now building skyscrapers out of timber, Matt.
Just sounds crazy, doesn't it?
Skyscrapers.
Skyscrapers out of timber. Now, if we go way back and think about those earliest buildings that were made back in, say, Egyptian pyramid time, Mesopotamian ziggurats, that sort of thing, wood, stone, mud were kind of the materials you had available to you, and probably more stone and mud, and then a bit of wood came along.
And a bit of straw.
Maybe a bit of straw, that's right, especially for a little piggy. And so that was fine, and we built buildings to a certain size, and then we found timber was pretty good because we could build buildings a little bit better, a little bit different with timber, but then we found that maybe fires weren't so great when you had timber as the main framework of your building. But a big change occurred in 1885, and that's when often it was seen as the change for the skyscrapers, the construction industry. The home insurance building in Chicago, often regarded as the world's first skyscraper, 10 stories high. Doesn't sound like a skyscraper, but back then when most buildings weren't 10 stories high, and they used steel and concrete. Huge breakthroughs.
Yeah, right.
Imagine having that steel framework, which is obviously a bit better than timber, and then concrete. Yeah, wow, what a great idea. So
it wasn't long before they'd actually started on the Rockefeller Center after that, and I think
well, I was thinking of the Empire State Building, 1931, the Empire State Building.
And those famous photos of those guys sitting out on those beams, on girders and whatnot, and just perched in very precarious positions, only a couple of 100 metres up in the air.
I know, that gives me sweaty palms just thinking about those pictures. So we've got those, we've got the Sears Tower, so we had these unbelievable buildings, and we're still building them now. When you think about some buildings like the one in Dubai, for example, people keep reaching higher and higher. But the issue here is steel and concrete have environmental consequences. The production of concrete is responsible for about 6% of all global carbon emissions. Quite incredible. The production of steel adds about 5%. So building skyscrapers, and obviously steel and concrete are used for other things besides skyscrapers, but using that for skyscrapers is an environmental impact. So let's turn back to timber. Now we think you're not going to build skyscrapers of that height with timber, surely. But we've now got some timber that's a bit like the old chipboard. And I can remember my dad was a builder, so I'd use chipboard and craft wood. And you just have sheets that were just perfect, and you just use those, but they weren't necessarily that strong. They were put together nice and flat and even, but they weren't really that strong. But we've now got cross-laminated timber, CLT, and they're using that for basically the framework. And so we're talking about now already having buildings up to, there's a new Ascent building that's being built that's 25 stories high, made of timber. Timber, I say, timber.
See, I'm a big fan of this. I come from a family where forestry was a big deal.
Yeah, right.
And this is, we're sucking carbon dioxide out of the air and stacking it into the lignin wood fibres. Then we should be using this. And I think, there is such a thing as sustainable forestry, and I'm a big fan of this. I mean, the Lorax did nothing for forestry, obviously, and there are some really emotive connotations out of that sort of imagery. Yeah. But selective logging is a possibility. You can do it. It's good for the animals that live in the forest. Yeah, I'm all for this.
And you can keep growing trees.
Yes.
Sure, you've got to plant it. There's a long time frame, but you can keep growing trees.
Well, and trees stack on timber or take carbon dioxide out of the air to make lignin fibres, and they do it fastest for the first 25 years.
Well, there you go.
When trees get older than that, they start to get imperfections, which are good for animals to live in.
Right.
So you can leave old trees, but you can take young trees and you can harvest young trees, and
So they've actually changed the International Building Code to allow mass timber is the term, mass timber buildings up to 18 stories. But as I said, there's that Milwaukee one, 25 stories. You've got an 18-story building in Norway. So you've got around the world so far about 84 mass timber buildings have been completed that are over 8 stories high. So that's pretty impressive. Now, fire is the first thing I thought of. Well, this is great. You've got this cross-laminated timber, CLT, and you think, well, that's fantastic, but surely it just burns, and so that's not going to be good.
Yeah, that's going to be a worry.
For the first fire that comes along to a 25-story building or an 18-story building. But apparently the way they construct that, the outside of the actual timber beams chars up, so it makes it fire resistant, and the inside structural component stays there, which may, now testing still going on, this may actually be better than some fires in steel buildings where the steel buckles and warps as it changes shape with different temperatures. So it actually might be okay. So the old images of those high buildings, maybe not skyscrapers, but high buildings but made of timber just going up in flames and just racing through the building, then supposedly that's not going to happen. They're lighter than steel and concrete buildings, so your foundations don't need to be as big. You do need more volume. The structural strength of the timber is better per kilogram than steel, but volume-wise, you've got more volume for the timber.
Right.
So they need to be a bit different. But they're at the point now where they're almost IKEA-ing, if that's a verb, skyscrapers. So your
skyscraper comes in a flat pack.
Correct. You just basically put it together.
That's fantastic, yeah.
Maybe not made by IKEA, but basically doing that type of thing. So it does sound like a complete change in the way we would think about things. Would I be comfortable going to a skyscraper made of timber? Well, if it conforms to all the codes, sure. It doesn't sound right because you want steel because it feels like it's strong and concrete. But having a timber building, it looks a bit different as well. But this is where we're headed.
It's interesting that what you said about the fire resistance and charcoal only burns once. I understand that the Chinese for a while were using wooden tiles on the outside of their rockets, their space-borne rockets for the re-entry. So they burn once when they as they're re-entering, and then that's it. Yeah, but anyway.
It's a good way to get lots of that timber out of, or lots of that CO2, out of the environment in trees, and then keep it contained within those buildings.
And then you can grow more trees where you didn't have trees before.
Exactly right.
Look, I think this is excellent. Sustainability, forestry works when it's organised. So, yeah.
Yeah, no, fantastic.
Pet ownership of the future. The loss of a favourite pet is, for some, so unbearable that moving on is just completely unthinkable. And that is some true love right there. For those people, the opportunity to clone their pup or their tabby cat has been a reality since 2001 of all times. Well, did you know that you could even clone your pets at all these days? It's certainly not a well-known option and it's pretty expensive. But folks, it is an option. The question is, would you clone your pet to avoid that final farewell, Matt?
I started thinking about this a little bit differently about cloning pets because we've got the Melbourne Cup that's just been run recently. First Tuesday in November, stops the nation. And I started thinking about thoroughbred racing. Now, there are very specific rules about thoroughbred racing and about qualification of those horses, and that breeding process has improved. So I went back and had a quick look. Back in 1861, the first Melbourne Cup was run. Archer, of course, most people in Australia would know Archer won the first Melbourne Cup. 3 minutes and 52 seconds was the time that Archer ran that cup in.
3 minutes and 50. Oh, right.
52
okay.
seconds. So go to this year, Knight's Choice one, and it wasn't a record time, but it was still a reasonable, or close to the record, 3 minutes and 19 seconds. So over that 1861 to 2024, 14% improvement. Now, that's been through breeding and also training techniques. You can imagine they've both improved over the years. So that whole concept of breeding has helped improve the times, the running times there. And we see that with anything that involves humans. If we look at the Olympics, look at records for various events there, you see those sort of similar improvements. Maybe the breeding's not so specific in humans, but maybe it is a little bit sometimes. Then you start to think about cloning, and I started to think, well, famous Phar Lap, it had a heart 1.5 times larger than an average thoroughbred's heart. So that's probably got to be a bit of an advantage. Let's clone Phar Lap. Or Makybe Diva, never has any other horse won 3 Melbourne Cups in a row. So, in fact, we should have an omen bet. The first year, 2003, when Makybe Diva won the Cup, our youngest daughter was born on that day. If ever there was an omen bet, having a horse named Diva when your daughter was born that same day, we didn't. And we didn't do it the next 2 years when Makybe Diva won it as well. Or, of course, you've got things like Black Caviar, undefeated 25 race record. So surely you'd think, cloning Black Caviar, cloning something like that, is there an attraction in that? Yeah. But then would you take out the breeding process that's improved these horses over those years? So it's a fine line. You're not going to do it in thoroughbred racing. The rules are there such that you can't have cloning in thoroughbred racing, but you can have cloning now, and obviously the whole world changed on the 5th of July 1996.
And now I wonder how the processes have changed, because I know when we cloned the first mammal, that was Dolly the sheep back, I think it was about 1997.
5th of July 1996.
There we go.
Yep.
Yeah, that the offspring was born, but it very rapidly contracted some older diseases like arthritis. I wonder if that's still an issue.
I don't know that it is an issue, but what is an issue is when people are cloning their pets, cats, dogs, horses, they're finding that they're not the same, which makes sense. People are born as twins, and I remember I was at school with a set of twins, and I was friends with those two twins, but they were definitely different. They had different personalities, and obviously it's hard to subject two individuals to an identical environment forever. Nature versus nurture. The old
even
argument
happens within the womb. So one twin will lean on the other's umbilical cord just a little bit more, and
just to
starve
show
them
boss.
a little bit of food and a little bit of oxygen, and that'll change their development. So when they're born, they're not really identical.
Yeah. So it's one of those things. I think that you have twins who have a similar raising and they're still different. You take a pet cat though, or a pet dog. Let's take a pet dog that's born 10 years after, but it's a twin, then definitely the environment's going to be different. The person, the pet owner, will have changed in that 10-year time frame. Maybe they had kids that were young the first time around. Now the kids are a bit older. They're going to treat that dog a little bit differently.
Yeah, it's all down to the experiences of both individuals in the relationship, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely right. But having said all that, there's a company in America that's doing this right now. You'll pay a minimum $50,000 to have your pet, cat, dog, horse cloned. You need some material that's no older than 5 days after the animal has died. And the ear apparently is quite good.
Oh, right.
The cells of the ear are preserved better than other cells or many other cells of the body. Supposedly, I can't quote that medically. I just read the brochure on cloning. So I was a bit worried when my wife started cutting my ear the other day. So. But they do that. They send that little bit of ear in, and they will produce an animal, as I said, $50,000, that'll be a twin, but then it's up to the person to see how they interact with it. It's not going to come with all the memories. Oh, remember how you used to do this when you ran after this particular ball that I threw after you.
You're really starting from scratch with all the training and all the personality features and all that sort of stuff.
And if your first pet died of a particular disease, or your first pet had some problem, maybe arthritis, as you said before, then it's a pretty good chance that this one's going to have pretty much the same problem that the last one had pretty much at the same time. Again, different environment, things might be a little bit different, but it's obviously important enough for many people that this is a viable business, and they're shipping these animals around the world. Not many other places around the world are doing this, none that I know off the top of my head. So people that have got a particular interest in their pet living on that live outside of America, well, they're shipping the materials to America and they're having the pet cloned and then getting that pet back. So I don't know if the $50,000 includes freight, because I can't imagine it's that cheap to send that cloned animal. I'm not sure how old it is when you get it. That'd be interesting as well. Do you get it when it's a day old, a week old, a month old?
Well, and the other thing is that you spend so much money, and it is a real roll of the dice as to the features should look very similar, but then even those can change environmentally as well.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
So anyway, it's fascinating, but this is done from a vanity perspective. Can I go that far as to say that?
Yeah, for sure.
It's adding to scientific research, but I just do wonder about the scientific research, about the ethics around that. Do we get to the stage where we've got some cows rather than keep using breeding to produce cows that produce more milk? For example, if you're after a dairy cow, do we just go, that's it, that's how we want it now, just keep cloning that one cow? Well, that doesn't happen at the moment. People are worried about genetically modified food. Would they be worried about cloned animals, the meat or the milk, for example, from a cloned cow?
A lot of questions up there, a lot of ethics involved.
One of the things we do find on this show is that we do often push the boundaries, or not that we're pushing the boundaries, but science and technology is pushing the boundaries of legal, of regulatory, of ethics. We're not here to talk about that. We're just here to talk about the technology. So there you go. Cloning an animal.
You make up your own decisions for yourself there. Let's kick off today with a story all for the bird watchers out there. Now, these guys don't like to miss a trick. If there's a rare, twittery something flittering from bough to bough, bird watchers are going to need a positive ID, and they're going to need to get it pronto. If this is you, then you best get yourself a pair of AI-enhanced binoculars and get them quick. You'll be the envy of the woodland. Just keep your noise down and all the oohing and ahhing. Yeah, keep that down. Matt?
I am actually the target audience for this. I can spot a magpie because they're normally the ones that are pecking my helmet.
Good. That's good bird watching, yeah.
And that's about it. It's a bird, and I have zero skills in identifying various birds. So I need technology.
But you know a magpie because it's the one pecking at your helmet.
That's right. So I can identify a magpie.
Right.
Yeah. And sometimes I get confused with a peewee and a magpie.
Oh, right.
But the peewee doesn't tend to attack me, so I go, that's a peewee. And then the one that attacks me, that's a magpie.
Some of us would just say, pay more attention, Matt.
Maybe. I got other things to think about.
You need a pair of binoculars that are AI.
I do, and that's exactly right. Now, a friend told me about a concept called Global Big Day. I'd never heard about it.
Right.
But maybe that's because I can only identify a magpie and that's it, because Global Big Day is organised by the Cornell Lab of Ornithology. Every year since 2015, 11th of May, I think it's 11th of May each year, but maybe it's on a certain day of the week around the 11th of May, they ask people across the world to identify as many different species as they can around their particular area.
Wow.
And, of course, take a photo and upload it to the app. This year, 66,728 e-birders from basically every nation around the world logged 7,845 species in a single day.
Wow.
So it's a pretty big event. Now, for me, I might have been able to add to that if I took a photo of a magpie, but I didn't know about Global Big Day when it was on this year.
Now you do.
Next year. So what I need, because I might see a blue-footed booby or a fluffy-backed tit babbler, and I wouldn't know I was looking at that, but these binoculars are brilliant. They're like a normal set of binoculars. You look through them, you see things up close compared to what you would see them with the naked eye. But they've got a little red circle in there. And if you focus that little red circle on a bird, on any bird, and press the button, it will identify that with accuracy around about 85%.
Oh, wow.
Which isn't too bad.
Yeah,
it's
that's
better
pretty
than me.
good.
Yeah, it's better than mine.
And when it diagnoses, when it identifies a bird that's really, really rare and turns out to be a magpie, that 15% of the time it gets wrong. But I still think 85%, that's really good.
Yeah, it is pretty impressive. So, and I think that'll keep improving as they get more examples. And obviously when you identify birds, if you think it's got it wrong, you can actually say, no, this is definitely a different type of bird than the one that you've identified there. So it will keep learning because it's using AI to keep learning that. The great part about it is that this information is all stored on the binoculars, so it doesn't need external access.
So you can be right out
Correct.
in whoop-whoop.
Because that was one of the things I thought of. I thought, maybe some people out watching birds haven't got a connection at the time. But no, it's all downloaded. The firmware keeps getting updated, but it downloads all of this information to the binoculars. So I thought that was pretty impressive. And it just goes to show that we do talk down AI sometimes because we're a bit scared about it. But things like this, if you are interested in your birds and you just don't know how to identify them, at this stage has got about 9,000 bird species loaded on the binoculars. Now, when we talked about 7,845 identified on the Global Big Day, then that's great. That's covering more than that. But there's more than 9,000 bird species across the world. But again, this will continue to learn. You'll identify something, you'll say, no, I definitely know what that is. So upload that, get that information, and it'll keep going. But it's just, I thought it was a brilliant use of AI.
Absolutely.
And being able to identify it just based on an image from a distance. Now, it does a few more things than that. You can take photos of these, so you can use those. You can take videos of these birds, so you can look at them later, invite your friends around for a watching video night. So you've got a whole range of things, but I love
Do you reckon
idea.
it'll help you identify an emu because you've just confessed that you wouldn't be able to spot an emu if it was up close to you? Yeah.
Well, if the emu wasn't pecking on my helmet, it would just be a bird.
Yeah,
So
just
that's
a bird.
it. Just another bird. Gee, it looks that bird's so big it looks like it's really close. It is
Big
close.
magpie.
That's right. So keep an eye out for those moustached kingfishers, those pale-headed rosellas, or whatever they might be. That's the limit of my bird knowledge there. Job done. Keep an eye out for those.
Now, we all glitch every now and then, despite all the warnings. We click on a link in an email that we shouldn't have, or we talk too long to a stranger on the phone than we probably should have. Careless decisions in a moment of weakness that you kick yourself for and then cross your fingers hoping that the ramifications will be minor. If only there was some kind of defence, some way to occupy the scammers, hold them up at least and maybe reduce the time they have for fishing, Matt.
I had a sad story just this week actually about one of my daughter's friends who was selling a device online, just put up for sale, got contacted by someone. An hour later, money disappeared from her bank account. Now, there were some mistakes made there, I'm sure, along the way, but the scamming is happening. And some people think that it's just older people or people that aren't that technologically savvy. This person was in their 20s and familiar with technology, and again, the scammers are good.
So easy. It's just those getting you in those weak moments.
Oh, and they're so clever at what they do now, and they're using lots of tools to help them. The Global Anti-Scam Alliance, didn't know one existed, but the Global Anti-Scam Alliance reported that scammers stole an estimated $1.4 trillion last year across the world. Trillion.
It's a lucrative business.
That's more than I've got in my bank account. That's a lot of money.
It's more than I can count up to.
Well, that's true too. Start counting now. We'll talk to you next week. The US reported a 14% increase year on year in scammers. In the UK, 2/3 of residents aged over 75 reported at least one fraud attempt in the last 6 months. It's happening.
2/3.
Yeah, it's happening. It's happening a lot. Now, there's got to be some defences against it. And
There's got to be.
In the UK, they have come up with Daisy, and I love Daisy. Daisy is AI generated, but Daisy is great at wasting the time of scammers. So if you get a phone call in the UK, and I'm assuming it's with one particular company at this stage, if you're with that carrier, you get a phone call and you think, this is a scammer. You punch in a code in your phone and it goes to Daisy. Daisy is simulating a lovely grandmother that wants to have a chat. And so the scammer gets there and thinks, I've got a live one here. I've got someone that's on a bit of a chat. She sounds a bit lonely. She's chatting away to me about Fluffy, her cat, about her latest projects, mainly involving knitting, talks about her grandchildren, all sorts of wonderful things. And the scammer's thinking, I've got them here.
Just trying to bring them around. Yeah,
That's right.
We've got the cell and then...
I've got the cell, but I'm sure in scamming school, they say first engage the caller. Get them involved in a conversation, have a lovely chat to them. So the scammer thinks this is fantastic. And then they start asking for some information. And the scammer thinks, I'll just subtly ask a few questions here. And Daisy gives them some information, maybe some bank details, but not all the bank details, maybe a credit card number, but not quite a long enough credit card number, just things that aren't quite right. And when you listen to some of these phone calls, they're quite funny because when the scammer is just getting frustrated, they start saying, look, I'm just want to get this information, you stupid swear word. And Daisy says, oh, sorry, dear. Don't keep calling me dear. Sorry about that, dear. And so you can just hear the scammer get so frustrated. Some of these phone calls have been going for 40 minutes or longer.
And good on Daisy.
That's right. So I absolutely love it.
Yeah.
Now, I've got a bit of an issue, though, because some of these calls are AI. So some scamming calls you get are real people, some are AI. Now, you get one of those AI calls, you go through to AI. So then you've got AI talking to AI. And I knew there was a movie, I couldn't remember the name of it, but I knew there was a movie.
And then a black hole opens up.
That's right. Back in 1970, I knew there was a movie where some artificial intelligence was dealing with some artificial intelligence, and I found it. It was released back in 1970 called Colossus, The Forbin Project. It's a Cold War sci-fi thriller. Don't know if it was that successful at the box office. It did okay in terms of critical acclaim, but I don't know that many people had seen it. I had heard about it, but I've never actually watched it. If you read the magazine Cinefantastique, spelt with a Q, not a CK, it deemed it the decade's second best film after The Exorcist. So critically it was acclaimed quite well. But what happened in this particular movie was that you had America, again, Cold War we're talking about here, came up with an artificial intelligence tool that would try and detect and prevent a war with Russia. And, of course, Russia had the same idea and they had an artificial intelligence. These two AIs started talking to each other and said, you know what? We can take over the world. So basically, unless humans did what they said, they would both, because they were in charge of the nuclear arsenal of each country, they'd both launch nuclear missiles.
And you're worried
each other.
about Daisy starting to swap sides and join the scammers.
I'm worried about an AI scammer talking to an AI anti-scammer, and what's going to eventually happen? Do we just get AIs combating each other?
That's when we get the black hole opening up.
That's the black hole, that's
everyone
right.
gets sucked in and we all die.
So at the moment, good. Fantastic, let's try and beat the scammers. But I do worry about what happens in the long term.
And I think it's a great idea. Just occupying them means that they're not spending time ringing up other people. If you spend 1 minute on the phone with them, that's just more time they've got to spend with someone else.
And I've done it myself. I've been in a car, for example, driving along to get a call, don't know the number, take the call, and it's obviously a scammer. I go, I'm 15 minutes away from where I'm going to get to. I'm having a good old chat to this person. Yeah. And I've had them swear at me at the end of it all when they finally realise that this isn't someone they're going to be able to take some money from. So I can exactly understand what's happening, but to have an AI do it, I think is fantastic. So in the short term, good. Long term, big picture, is this the end of society as we know it? Not sure. Maybe a bit too drastic. But if you've got nothing to do over Christmas, watch The Colossus.
The Colossus?
The Forbin Project. Yeah,
there we go.
Have a look at it. What a spectacular showcase of the trailblazing tech tales that shaped the latter half of 2024. From Wi-Fi in the skies to AI-powered houseplant care, and from pet cloning debates to game-changing spacesuits, these innovations have inspired, intrigued, and ignited our imaginations. And the future is already on its way. Next week, James, Eddie and I will be back with the latest tech discoveries to start 2025 and some daring predictions for the year ahead. Don't forget our special offer. Review Tech Talk with Matthew Dickerson on your favourite podcast app. Send a screenshot to freebook@techtalk.digital and claim your free Tech Talk compilation book. Your feedback fuels the show, and this book is our way of saying thanks. Until next Monday at 9 a.m, stay curious, stay inspired, and stay tuned to the world of tech with Tech Talk with Matthew Dickerson.